Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are looking at a powerful stack of sources, from global breach reports to newly finalized regulatory texts, and together they paint a crystal clear picture for 2026.
They really do.
And that picture is that compliance is no longer just some burdensome cost center. It has completely transformed. It's now a non-negotiable financial necessity.
A necessity, the lack of which could genuinely threaten the solvency of major companies. I mean, we're not being dramatic here.
Not at all.
That's the key realization we're extracting today. We're witnessing this massive, I'd say, pivotal convergence.
A convergence, right.
On one side, you have these tectonic shifts in global privacy and cyber regulation. We're talking the EU, Canada, the U.S. states, all ratcheting up pressure at the same time.
And on the other side?
On the other, you have these incredibly specialized sector risks. And today, we're really going to focus on one in particular, the rapidly maturing high-stakes cannabis industry.
And when these two forces slam together, I mean, the cost of data mismanagement just becomes astronomical.
Yeah.
Our sources show statistics detailing these spiraling U.S. enforcement costs. It's a really unique American anomaly, alongside detailed breakdowns of new mandates, like the EU's Cyber Resilience Act.
And we also have specific and sometimes, wildly contradictory insights into how all these geopolitical and regulatory shifts are impacting the cannabis market.
Contradictory is a good word for it. From U.S. rescheduling all the way to Thailand's pretty dramatic and rapid medical pivot.
Yeah. So our mission in this deep dive is really crafted specifically for you. We know you want a shortcut to understanding where the next major compliance risks are hiding.
Right, and how to get ahead of that enforcement curve.
And how to do it without letting all this information overload just paralyze your strategic decision-making.
So we're here to distill these fragmented global updates into, actionable knowledge.
Actionable knowledge about how to achieve operational maturity and, crucially, how you can quantify the true cost of failure so you can proactively budget for security instead of reacting to a disaster.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're going to start segment one, not with policy, but with the bottom line.
The money.
The money.
Yeah.
The cold, hard costs of failure. If you view data breaches as just some IT cleanup problem, these numbers from 2025 should instantly shift your perspective to the C-suite level.
They have to.
Because the financial penalty for poor security governance is now really an existential threat.
Right. So the global average cost of a data breach is that striking metric we use to gauge the industry's health. And, the initial read of the 2025 data offers a hint of good news, but it's deceiving.
A little deceiving, yeah.
Globally, the average cost actually dropped a bit to $4.44 million.
Okay, so a drop. From what?
That's a 9% decrease from the 2024 all-time high, which was $4.88 million. So on the surface, you might look at that and think, okay, worldwide, organizations are getting slightly better at this.
Better at response and containment, maybe.
Exactly. Maybe through better incident response planning or better tooling.
There's always a but.
There's a huge but. And this is the strategic anomaly that demands our attention because it hits home hard for any business operating or sourcing data in the U.S.
So what's happening stateside?
While that global average dipped, the United States saw a dramatic surge. It hit an all-time high average cost of $10.22 million per breach.
$10.22 million. Wow.
That's a 9% increase year over year. So it effectively makes the U.S. the most expensive place in the world to suffer a data breach.
By how much?
By a factor of more than 2, it's not even close.
So what's driving that? Why is the U.S. so much more expensive?
The sources attribute that U.S. surge directly and primarily to 2 interlocking factors: higher regulatory fines and much higher detection and escalation costs.
Okay, that makes sense. The complexity of the regulatory environment in the U.S. has to be the engine driving this exceptional cost, right?
It is. Globally, regulators are often moving towards consolidation. Think of the gravitational pull of GDPR. In the U.S., a breach means you could be triggering 20 different state laws.
Each with its own notification timeline, its own reporting structure, its own penalty framework. It's a nightmare.
It's a compliance nightmare. So when a breach hits, the first thing U.S. legal and IT teams have to do is spend a massive amount of time and money just trying to figure out which of those 20-plus jurisdictions I need to report to.
And what specific data fields trigger which notification, and how to manage that multi-jurisdictional remediation effort without tripping over another state's rules.
Precisely. That cost of just figuring out who to report to and how to remediate across these numerous, sometimes conflicting state mandates, that's baked right into those elevated detection and escalation costs.
So the patchwork is the problem.
The patchwork is the penalty. The compliance complexity in the U.S. is making failure exponentially more expensive than anywhere else in the world. And this is why regulatory mapping is quickly moving from a compliance nice to have to a critical financial tool.
And when we look under the hood of that $4.44 million global average, you see where the real market pain is felt, regardless of where you are geographically.
Yeah, the hidden costs.
The hidden costs.
Yeah.
Lost business, which covers quantifiable things like system downtime, lost customers, and that long-term reputation damage, that alone averaged a staggering $1.38 million.
$1.38 million just in lost business. And what's also deeply interesting, and maybe a reflection of market power, is the impact on you, the consumer.
Right. Who pays for all this?
Well, you do. In a trend that shows organizations are getting very good at transferring financial risk, 45% of responding organizations admitted they just increased the cost of their products or services after a breach.
So they're passing the buck.
They are essentially passing those breach costs directly to the consumer. They absorb the cost as a temporary liquidity hit, and then they make the market pay for their own security failings. It raises some serious questions about consumer trust and market transparency, doesn't it?
It really does. So that financial pressure, that $10 million U.S. average, and the $1.38 million in lost business, that drives the urgency behind the second maker takeaway in this segment, what our sources are calling the speed imperative.
Yes. The evidence here is just irrefutable. The faster you find and contain the problem, the less it costs. It's a race against the clock, and the stakes are millions of dollars.
And are we getting faster?
We've seen some measurable improvement here. The meantime organizations took to identify and contain a breach fell to 241 days in 2025.
241 days.
Which is thankfully a 9-year low, but that's still, 8 months? It's far too long for a modern incident response framework.
8 months? But the financial incentive to shave those days off the clock is just staggering.
It's huge. If you can get that full breach life cycle from the moment of identification all the way to containment down to fewer than 200 days, that speed is associated with cost savings of 29%.
29%.
Which is $1.14 million saved on average, purely by being efficient and fast. We are talking about nearly a $2 million variance in cost between a slow response and an effective automated one.
And it's not just how fast you respond, it's who finds it first, isn't it?
The method of detection matters immensely. We're talking almost $1 million difference.
Okay, break that down.
When your internal security teams identify the breach first, the costs average about $4.18 million. But when the attacker is the one who discloses the breach, through a ransom note or by selling the data publicly, that cost jumps dramatically to $5.08 million.
So it's $1 million difference just based on who tells you you've been breached.
It is. This clearly shows that investment in proactive, real-time detection tools and internal monitoring capabilities is not just a security measure, it's a direct, quantifiable investment in cost mitigation.
Speaking of where the attacks are coming from, let's look at the top attack vectors and vulnerabilities. They consistently highlight these persistent weaknesses in governance and supply chain risk management.
Absolutely. The second most prevalent and second costliest attack vector globally was third-party and supply chain compromise.
Your vendors.
Your vendors. It costs $4.91 million per breach on average. This is just a reflection of our interconnected digital world where you are only as secure as your weakest vendor.
And what's particularly worrying about relying on external vendors is the time it takes to fix the breach if it starts with them.
It creates a massive cleanup effort. I mean, you're trying to investigate an environment you don't even control.
Right.
Breaches stemming from a supply chain compromise took the absolute longest to resolve. They averaged 267 days.
Almost a month longer than the overall mean time.
Yeah, nearly a month longer. It just shows that the trust you place in your vendors is often the most difficult risk to contain and clean up. You don't control their environment, you don't control their logs or their incident response timeline.
And are companies even checking your vendors properly?
The data suggests not really. Organizations are only assessing about 40% of their vendors on average, mostly due to a lack of resources, and that vulnerability is just being ruthlessly exploited by attackers.
And if you are still looking for that one single point of failure that keeps coming up year after year in your security stack,
hmm
you have to look inward.
The human element.
The human element
Yeah.
is involved in a staggering 60% of all breaches.
Yes. And that 60% figure, I think we need to frame that as a governance failure, not necessarily a technology failure.
That's a great point.
That human element manifests in several predictable, exploitable ways, but the most common high-level component we see in these breaches is credential abuse.
So not hacking, but logging in.
Essentially, yes. It accounts for 32% of those human-related incidents. This is followed by social engineering actions like phishing at 23%, and then just simple configuration or user errors at 14%.
It's striking that attackers are often not, breaking down the walls. They are simply logging in using stolen or misused credentials.
The data bears that out completely. Abusing valid accounts remained the preferred entry point for cybercriminals in 2024, representing 30% of all reported incidents. It's a systemic failure of identity and access governance.
If they have the keys, they don't need to pick the lock.
That's it. It just highlights the critical need for rigorous multi-factor authentication, privileged access management, and behavior analysis to detect that credential misuse early.
And once they are inside, what is the most common malicious action they take?
Malware deployment, once again, was the most common action threat actors took against phishing networks. It occurred in 42% of all reported incidents.
And ransomware is still a big piece of that.
A huge piece. Of that 42%, 28% involved ransomware, which is still incredibly costly. It's an average of $5.08 million per ransomware attack in 2025. That's a 3% increase year over year.
So ransomware costs are actually going up.
They are. The persistence of ransomware shows that organizations are still failing to segment their networks effectively, leaving too many easily accessed systems open once an attacker gets a foothold.
So to quickly synthesize that first segment, speed saves you nearly $2 million. The U.S. environment is hyper expensive because of fragmentation, and the human element contributes to 60% of all breaches, primarily through credential abuse.
Right.
When you combine those points, the demand for integrated risk assessment and compliance systems that can automate detection and reduce that human error becomes not just acute, but, financially mandatory.
Manual spreadsheet-based compliance management simply cannot keep up. It can't keep up with the velocity of modern threats or the fragmentation of these regulatory frameworks. The costs are just too high.
And this complexity, this need for speed, combined with that 60% human factor, it's a crisis that demands better tooling. Which brings us perfectly to thank our partners who make this deep dive possible. Given the complexity of compliance across highly regulated industries and that urgent pressure to increase detection speed and reduce human error, organizations need proactive tools that unify risk assessment and compliance processes into a single source of truth.
It's a single pane of glass.
Exactly. So we're thanking www.canasecure.tech for supporting this deep dive, which focuses on providing exactly that unified visibility for high-risk data environments, especially in these complex emerging sectors.
All right, moving into segment 2.
U.S. privacy titans. We are shifting strategically from this era of, fix it later if we have to aggressive targeted enforcement. The sheer volume of new laws and amendments coming into effect in 2026 creates a compliance headache that requires immediate resource allocation.
That's the definitive shift. 2025 was the year regulators spent finalizing these really demanding regulations and ramping up their capacity for aggressive enforcement. Now, in 2026, we see the results in practice.
The bar has been raised.
The regulatory baseline has been pushed up significantly. We have 3 new comprehensive state laws going into effect on January 1st, 2026.
Okay, which states are now fully online demanding our attention?
We're talking about Indiana with the INCDPA, Kentucky with the KCDPA, and Rhode Island with the RIDTPPA.
So 3 more.
Their activation brings the total number of states with comprehensive consumer privacy laws to 20. These laws typically establish Virginia-style consumer privacy frameworks, which means essential consumer rights like access, correction, deletion, and that fundamental right to opt out of targeted advertising and data sales.
And who is in scope for these new 3 laws? Who has to worry about this?
Generally, they apply to businesses processing the personal data of 100,000 or more consumers. Or if you're processing the data of 25,000 or more consumers and you derive over 50% of your revenue from data sales.
So if you are a national organization, you have to know your data volume and your revenue sources for every single state you touch.
You do. There's a crucial strategic difference, though, regarding enforcement. Kentucky's KCDPA is notable for having retained a permanent right to cure violations.
A permanent right to cure. That seems like a huge deviation from the trend.
It is. It offers businesses a chance to fix errors before fines are levied. But elsewhere, the era of fix-it-later truly seems to be ending.
Right, and regulators are signaling this by elevating compliance to a governance mandate with, and this is key, personal legal risks.
That's the rise of executive liability, and it's a profound strategic change. California, for example, is now requiring a member of executive management, typically a CEO, CFO, or general counsel, to personally attest to the accuracy of the business's risk assessments for certain personal information processing activities.
Attest. What does that mean in practical terms for someone in the C-suite?
It means that the leader must certify, often under penalty of perjury, that the organization has done its due diligence.
So they're signing their name to it.
They're signing their name, that the data mapping is accurate, that the controls are genuinely effective. This is a deliberate move to elevate privacy compliance from, a technical IT checklist item to a serious corporate governance mandate.
Placing personal, legal, and career risks directly on the shoulders of the leadership team.
Exactly. To ensure they treat privacy as seriously as they treat financial reporting.
And speaking of urgency, if you've been relying on getting a warning letter before getting fined, that grace period is rapidly running out, isn't it?
It is. The right to cure violations is expiring in several key states this year. We're talking Minnesota until January 31st, New Jersey until July 15, and Oregon as well.
And once that window closes.
Once that window closes, regulators can bypass the warning phase entirely and jump straight to penalties and litigation. This demands that businesses in those states shift immediately from, remediation planning to verifiable operational compliance, especially for their existing processes.
And we can already see what regulators are targeting based on the precedents from 2025.
Oh, yeah.
They're going after the publicly viewable issues they can spot without a subpoena. Things like broken opt-out processes, dark patterns in cookie banners, and inaccurate privacy policies.
They're counting the clicks.
Counting the clicks. Let's talk about those two key enforcement examples.
The first notable case involved Honda. They faced a fine for requiring excessive verification steps for consumers trying to opt out, and critically, for using asymmetrical cookie controls.
Asymmetrical control. So 1 click to opt in, but 5 clicks to a maze to opt out.
Basically. The regulators were explicitly punishing the use of these digital dark patterns. Those design choices intended to trick or confuse users into agreeing to share data. They were literally counting the clicks to ensure the consumer experience was fair and balanced.
The lesson there is that transparency isn't just about documentation, it's about user experience.
Absolutely. And the second key example involved sensitive health data. Healthline Media faced over a $1.5 million fine for failing to honor global privacy control, or GPC, signals.
And for misusing health-related data.
Specifically for targeted advertising. This action reinforces two massive trends. First, the mandatory nature of GPC compliance, which we'll discuss more in Segment 5, and second, the hyper-focus on sensitive data handling.
Right, and we saw the Blue Shield of California incident too. That triggered a major investigation after myth-configured analytics tools shared health information affecting 4.7 million members.
The sensitive data category is rapidly expanding, and the penalties for mishandling it are immediate and they are severe.
And that brings us to a fascinating area of convergence. The definition of sensitive data isn't static, is it?
Not at all. It's evolving to encompass entirely new technological concepts that are going to force businesses to completely rethink their data classification.
So what are these new frontiers of sensitive data?
That's right. Look at Connecticut. The CTDPA amendments, which become effective July 1st, 2026, they expand the definition of sensitive data to specifically include neural data.
Neural data. Wow. That sounds like science fiction, but this is a very real regulatory challenge now.
It is. This is information derived from brain activity, neurotechnology, or biometric inferences related to cognition or emotion.
So what does that mean in practice for a company that might not even be selling neuro headsets?
It means that if you are using any technology that infers a cognitive state, maybe a highly sophisticated biometric test for employee engagement, or even advanced ad targeting that infers an emotional response, That data could now fall under this high protection category.
So organizations in Connecticut have to implement entirely new classification standards and heightened protections.
And require explicit opt-in consent for this highly personal information. The infrastructure for managing this new data type just doesn't exist yet for most companies.
And geographically, we are seeing equally tight controls on traditional location data,
Oregon is banning the sale of precise geolocation data starting January 1st, 2026.
which applies massive restrictions to location-based apps and the whole ad tech industry.
It does. This focus on geolocation is part of a larger national trend. Colorado and Texas have also targeted companies processing that data. The message is clear. Highly granular location tracking is now considered deeply sensitive and a major compliance risk.
But the most intense legislative activity right now seems to be focused on minors. Children's privacy is a massive regulatory hot topic.
Regulators are hyper-focused on minors. They are imposing these sweeping obligations that go well beyond the existing COPIA framework. Look at Texas. The Texas App Store Accountability Act, effective January 1st, 2026, mandates age verification, requires parental consent for minors, and even demands the transmission of the user's age category to developers.
That is an immense technical lift. It means app stores can no longer treat identity verification as a simple checkbox.
No, they have to implement robust age estimation and verification technologies at the point of download, and then securely communicate that verified age category to the third-party developer. It changes the entire architecture of the digital marketplace.
And it introduces significant liability for the app stores themselves.
It does, and Virginia is attacking the usage side directly. The Virginia Social Media Amendments, also effective January 1st, 2026, mandate that platforms must identify users under the age of 16 and limit that minors' use to 1 hour per day, absent parental consent.
An hour a day. That forces platforms to implement age estimation systems and real-time session time control mechanisms. That is technically difficult to manage across different devices and session resets.
It's an unprecedented level of mandatory digital curfew imposed by the state. And we're also seeing Arkansas pushing AC to pay, demanding strict data minimization, and prohibiting targeted advertising without consent for users under 16. The days of treating teen data like adult data are definitively over.
And finally, we have to address this massive surge in litigation under the California Invasion of Privacy Acts, or CPA, fueled by digital tracking lawsuits. This is impacting every company with a website.
Yes. This centers on the use of common website tools like tracking pixels and analytics tools. The plaintiff's bar has seized on CPA's prohibition on pen registers or trap and trace devices.
Which were historically used for telephone surveillance, right?
Exactly, from like 1967. And they are arguing that modern online tracking pixels are the exact digital equivalent.
So using a wiretapping law against a modern tracking pixel. Which ruling cemented this legal analogy?
The key ruling here is the Campbellson v. Adidas decision from November 2025 in the Southern California Federal Court. The court rejected several prior dismissal attempts.
And what did they hold?
They held that allegations of Adidas installing tracking pixels on website visitors' browsers that recorded their personally identifiable information, or PII, were sufficient to plausibly allege the use of a prohibited pen register device under SOPA.
And critically, the court specifically rejected Adidas's defense that the plaintiffs had consented via inconspicuous terms and conditions found hidden in the website footer.
That's the key. The court determined that to constitute sufficient consent, you need an affirmative demonstration of assent something visible, like a pop-up window or a clear banner, not just buried text. Inconspicuous terms do not constitute consent.
And that ruling breathes massive new life into this theory of liability.
It does, and it exposes businesses across all industries to substantial legal risk tied to the use of these digital tracking tools if they don't have explicit, verifiable consent mechanisms in place.
Moving into segment 3. Global regulatory overhaul. The U.S. landscape is complex and fragmented, but globally, the compliance pressure cooker is set to high heat, especially in Europe and Canada. We often focus solely on GDPR, but the EU is raising the digital resilience baseline far beyond just data protection.
That's the strategic takeaway. The EU is implementing what we're calling the Cyber Resilience Triumvirate, a set of 3 overlapping laws designed to strengthen the entire digital ecosystem. This is a massive shift from voluntary security protocols to mandatory, verifiable cyber hygiene enforced by law.
Okay, let's start with the foundational piece, NIS2.
The NIS2 directive is now in full national transposition across all EU member states. It dramatically expands required enhanced security measures and incident reporting. It used to focus just on critical infrastructure.
But now,
But now its reach includes essential and important entities in the sectors like manufacturing, digital services, information technology management, and even certain medical device manufacturers.
so if you fall into scope, you have to do what?
You must implement enhanced security, risk assessments, and rigorous incident reporting protocols within 24 hours for major threats.
And its reach is global. If you are a U.S. company providing cloud services to a major European manufacturer, you are likely in scope.
Absolutely. Non-EU entities with a significant EU presence are firmly in scope, and non-compliance carries not only severe financial and reputational risks, but, importantly, the personal liability of the management team. Regulators are moving from preparatory work to active supervision, audits, and enforcement in 2026. This isn't just about security, it's about mandatory organizational maturity.
Next up, the game changer for product development, which is forcing hardware and software companies to fundamentally re-engineer their design process. The Cyber Resilience Act, or CRA.
The CRA's obligations begin in September 2026, and its scope is, well, virtually unprecedented. It imposes mandatory security by design standards on virtually all products with digital elements.
All products with digital elements.
Think IoT devices, smart devices, software applications sold to consumers or businesses, and industrial control systems.
So if you sell a smart toaster or an industrial pump controller in the EU, you are now legally responsible for that product's security lifecycle.
Precisely. Manufacturers must implement robust vulnerability management, provide clear security documentation, and ensure the product remains secure throughout its expected lifespan.
And the strategic consequence here is that the CRA effectively makes EU compliance the de facto global standard, doesn't it?
It does. It's too expensive for manufacturers to maintain a secure version for Europe and an insecure version for the rest of the world.
And the fines are staggering, which is why compliance is so urgent.
And they are existential. Non-compliance penalties can reach up to 15 million or 2.5% of annual global turnover. This means compliance with the CRA has to be anticipated early, built into the product lifecycle, and budgeted for now.
Then we have DORA, the Digital Operational Resilience Act, which is sector-specific, targeting the financial industry.
DORA requires financial institutions to ensure their ICT providers meet strict resilience and contractual requirements. Since January 2025, DORA clauses must be incorporated into all relevant service contracts.
So if you are a SaaS provider supporting a European bank, you are now legally obligated to meet those operational resilience standards yourself.
Yes, that creates a ripple effect of third-party risk management, requiring financial institutions to enforce compliance standards upstream and downstream in their supply chain. It's impossible to be resilient if your key subcontractors are not.
It also complements the Critical Entities Resilience Directive, right, CER.
It does. CER focuses on the physical and operational resilience of critical sectors against all hazards, so including natural disasters and physical attacks, not just cyber threats. The EU's goal is unified, mandatory resilience across the continent.
Okay, let's pivot away from Europe to Canada, which is making a significant and deliberate push for data sovereignty and new federal privacy standards that reflect these global enforcement trends.
Canada's 2026 privacy priorities center on establishing firmer control over Canadian data, particularly as geopolitical concerns intensify around foreign access. A new federal private sector statute is expected in late 2025 or early 2026 to replace the existing Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act, or PIPEDA.
And the proposed penalties alone are a clear sign of intent, mirroring the high-stakes regime of the EU.
They are severe. The proposed statute is expected to include fines of up to the greater of $25 million or 5% of gross global revenue.
5% of global revenue.
Yeah.
That puts Canada firmly in the camp of high-penalty jurisdictions.
It does. Furthermore, the federal government has released its digital sovereignty framework and is committing significant investment to a sovereign AI compute strategy.
What does a sovereign AI compute strategy mean for the average business handling Canadian data?
It means the federal government is actively exploring and funding measures to mitigate risk arising from foreign-based access to Canadian data, particularly in high-sensitivity areas like AI training and critical infrastructure.
So it suggests future policy measures may incentivize or even mandate storing and processing Canadian data within Canadian borders.
That's the direction of travel. It's creating challenges for U.S. or global cloud providers.
And we're also seeing a major consumer-focused initiative focused on financial data mobility, commonly referred to as open banking.
Yes. Amendments to PIPEDA are proposed to establish an interoperable data mobility right. This gives individuals the right to request that prescribed organizations, like banks or utilities, securely share specific personal information like financial data in a structured, commonly used technological format.
And they can share it with another person or organization authorized to receive it.
Exactly.
This forces a massive engineering effort. Organizations can't just send a PDF. They have to standardize their data formats, invest in secure, high-volume APIs for sharing, and ensure the identity of the recipient is verified.
It's a huge undertaking that transforms financial data from a static asset into a mobile, consumer-controlled one. It represents a fundamental shift in data ownership and control, demanding that Canadian financial institutions rapidly modernize their security and data governance stacks to facilitate secure sharing without compromising resilience.
This global pressure is intense, fragmented, and constantly evolving. Now, let's pivot to the sector that sits directly at the intersection of all these risks, the cannabis industry. It's high value, high risk, and sits at the nexus of all the fragmented rules we've discussed.
Moving into segment 4, the cannabis conundrum. This industry is projected to grow from, about $52 billion in 2026 to an astounding $283.64 billion by 2035.
Just a massive growth curve.
And this rapid expansion is layered upon contradictory and fragmented regulation, making compliance management nearly impossible without specialized tooling.
Okay, let's start with the U.S. rescheduling earthquake. The potential move of cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 of the Controlled Substances Act, if finalized in 2026, is monumental for the industry's financial health.
Monumental.
But it's far from the simplification many hoped for.
You're right to frame it as an earthquake. The biggest financial benefit is that the move to Schedule 3 would stop the notorious 280E tax penalty from applying to federal tax returns going forward.
And that one change is massive.
That single change materially changes cash flow, margins, and valuations for plant-touching operators overnight. It unlocks significant capital for investment.
But the compliance uplift that comes with that tax relief is immense and often overlooked. It's a trade-off.
It is a profound trade-off. S3 moves cannabis into a federal controlled substance regime overseen by agencies like the DEA and the FDA.
Which means
Expectations will tighten overnight around record-keeping, auditability, chain of custody, and product controls. Operations that were, let's say, marginally compliant under state law will be under immediate pressure to meet rigorous federal standards of documentation and defensibility.
And this leads directly to what we've dubbed the banking paradox.
Right. Rescheduling will likely make banking institutions more willing to engage, opening the conversation for legitimate financing and capital access that has been restricted for years.
But that willingness comes with a massive caveat.
A huge caveat. Banks will lean harder on tighter anti-money laundering AML controls. They will require beneficial ownership transparency, defensible financial records, and rigorous source of funds verification.
So just having clean books won't cut it anymore. Your operational data, your inventory movements, your transaction records, they have to be bankable and audit-proof on paper and in practice.
Exactly. Operational inefficiency now translates directly into capital risk, which is a scary proposition. Weak data governance, sloppy inventory tracking, or incomplete seed-to-sale data can translate directly into AML red flags for a bank, potentially freezing access to critical capital or services.
Cybersecurity and AML compliance are increasingly viewed as two sides of the same control environment by financial institutions in this sector.
They are.
Let's dive into the unique cyber threat landscape facing the cannabis sector, because the data involved here is extremely high value, drawing from both health and financial realms.
Dispensaries and cultivators sit on a trove of highly valuable data. They collect protected health information, or PHI, from medical card information. And highly sensitive, personally identifiable information, PII, including driver's license scans, home addresses, and detailed purchase histories that reveal sensitive health preferences.
And that combined data set is just gold for identity theft and resale on the dark web.
Gold. And it triggers strict protections under state health laws and privacy frameworks.
And the attackers are not just stealing data. They are strategically targeting operational pressure points to maximize their leverage.
Threat actors demonstrate an intimate understanding of the cannabis technology stack. They know how to hurt the business the most. We've seen ransomware attacks specifically targeted at point-of-sale, POS systems, during peak sales hours, 4:10-20 p.m., Fridays, holidays shutting down immediate revenue.
And they're targeting cultivation, too.
They are. They're targeting cultivation climate controls during critical harvest cycles. If they can freeze your automated environmental controls, they can destroy millions of dollars of product within days.
We've also seen a troubling trend of targeting inventory platforms just before mandatory state reporting deadlines.
Yes, that creates immediate regulatory pressure for businesses to pay ransoms to avoid severe state fines or the revocation of their license due to a reporting failure. The risk is no longer hypothetical. One breach at a third-party software provider in 2025 exposed data from hundreds of thousands of customers across multiple states.
And we keep coming back to that human vulnerability we discussed in segment 1.
Despite the high-risk profile-sensitive health data, massive cash flow, the human element, contributing to 60% of all breaches, persists.
Why is it so prevalent here?
In many dispensaries and cultivation facilities, the endemic practice of shared logins across shifts or using default passwords creates massive investigative blind spots for forensic teams trying to identify the source of data exfiltration or credential abuse. Security maturity has just not kept pace with industry growth.
Now let's look at the global shifts, which create immense fragmentation for multi-jurisdictional operators. Thailand, for instance, is seeing a dramatic regulatory reversal toward clinical rigor.
Following its celebrated decriminalization in 2022, Thailand is now aggressively returning to a strictly clinical rigor. New ministerial regulations aim to dismantle the largely unregulated commercial gray market that was largely focused on tourism.
So sales are being restricted.
Exclusively to medical facilities, licensed pharmacies, and traditional Thai medicine clinics where a physician prescribes and supervises dispensing.
That fundamentally excludes the general cannabis cafe or recreational dispensary model that flourished in tourist areas.
Completely. It signals a major political change of heart driven by public health concerns and the need to align with international drug control treaties. Reports suggest thousands of dispensaries were expected to close in 2026. It's a complete pivot back toward a strict medical-only framework.
Meanwhile, in Europe, Germany is also tightening its medical structure toward what they call fully analog care, despite recent steps toward liberalization.
Right. Draft updates to the Medical Cannabis Act, or MedCang, prohibit remote prescriptions unless the doctor has seen the patient in person within the last 4 quarters. This directly targets the telemedicine models that emerged post-2024.
And they're banning mail order sales.
They are. It forces delivery via the pharmacy's own licensed courier service or in-person collection.
So globally, we see this fascinating contradiction. On one hand, global privacy laws like NIS2 and GDPR are tightening the screws on digital compliance.
But on the other hand, the cannabis regulators in places like Germany and Thailand are tightening the screws on how the product is dispensed, forcing the process back toward physical, clinical, and analog controls.
And then you have Canada, which adds another layer of contradiction.
Right. The federal government there is actually streamlining and reducing the physical security burden on licensed producers, or LPs, through 2025 amendments to the cannabis regulations.
That's truly confusing. Why would Canada relax physical security in a high-stakes, high-revenue industry?
The stated goal is regulatory relief and cost savings for LPs, who argue the previous regulations were unnecessarily restrictive. They're removing several key physical requirements. For example, LPs are no longer required to have a security-cleared person on site during cannabis activities.
And they're relaxing physical security measures too.
Yes, no longer requiring intrusion detection for the site perimeter and deeming motion-activated visual recording sufficient for retention requirements.
So they're trusting digital surveillance more than physical security personnel, which is a major policy divergence from Europe and the US S3 shift.
And even logistics are simplified. Record-keeping for destruction is simplified by removing the requirement for a witness to the destruction of cultivation waste. This materially simplifies the destruction process.
So Canadian LPs are seeing a reduction in physical security burdens, even as they face increasing complexity from federal data sovereignty rules and severe new digital privacy fines.
It's a massive fragmentation between physical and digital compliance. It's the ultimate challenge for any multi-jurisdictional operator.
The combination of state, federal, and specialized industry regulations in cannabis, compounded by contradictory global pivots, truly requires a compliance tool that can simplify risk assessment across this complex patchwork. It's impossible to manage manually.
The fragmentation itself is the threat. You need a way to instantly see where you are simultaneously compliant in, say, California, non-compliant in Kentucky, and facing physical security over compliance in Canada. That level of operational visibility is essential for survival.
Which is why we need to thank our partners again. The difficulty of navigating this unique regulatory environment is why specialized compliance solutions are essential for operators in this high-risk industry. This deep dive is brought to you with support from www.canasecure.tech, and we strongly recommend you check out their risk assessment tool, www.cannabisrisk.diy, for a specialized compliance check tailored to the unique regulatory and operational risks we've been discussing in this segment.
All right, segment 5.
Moving into segment 5. The technology of resilience. It is fundamentally clear that simply having policies isn't enough anymore. The future of compliance relies on specific technological investments to automate governance, enforce standards at machine speed, and critically, reduce that pervasive 60% human risk factor.
What stands out most profoundly in the data is the quantified return on investment, the ROI of automation and artificial intelligence in security. This is not theoretical. It saves millions.
Okay, let's talk numbers and speed.
Organizations with extensive use of security AI and automation identified and contained a data breach a full 80 days faster than organizations with no use of automation.
80 days faster.
And the cost savings are quantifiable. Nearly $1.9 million saved compared to organizations relying on manual processes. That's money back in the bank simply for being technologically advanced.
And the type of technological adoption matters.
It does. High DevSecOps adoption, which integrates security practices early and automatically into the development lifecycle, saved $1.13 million in breach costs.
And just using AI for insights.
Using AI and machine learning insights specifically for threat modeling and anomaly detection saved nearly $224,000 on average. The data strongly supports moving governance controls from post-incident checklists to automated proactive enforcement integrated throughout the enterprise.
So we have the threat using AI, and the defense must use AI to keep up. The data shows the stakes. 1 in 6 breaches in 2025 involved AI-driven attacks.
And attackers are leveraging AI for speed and believability. They are using it primarily for highly customized phishing, that's 37% of AI-driven breaches, and sophisticated deepfake impersonation attacks at 35%.
And the efficiency gap is startling.
It's terrifying. A human-crafted custom phishing email takes an average of 16 hours to create and test. AI can generate a highly deceptive, contextually relevant phish in just 5 minutes.
5 minutes versus 16 hours. That's a 192x increase in speed.
Okay.
That kind of velocity fundamentally breaks traditional human speed defenses.
It does. Organizations must invest in security, AI, and automation across the full cybersecurity lifecycle prevention, detection, investigation, and response to counter threats operating at machine speed. Automation is no longer an efficiency measure. It is a critical requirement for maintaining a defensible perimeter.
Let's shift to how companies must operationalize privacy controls to meet tightening regulatory scrutiny, especially around honoring consumer opt-outs and eliminating those dark patterns.
The primary focus is moving toward a demonstrable universal opt-out experience. Global Privacy Control, or GPC, support is now mandatory in states like Oregon, California, Colorado, and Connecticut. Failure to honor GPC has already led to 7-figure settlements.
And this is a technical detection problem, right?
It is. Your systems must be configured to automatically recognize and enforce that signal, which requires system-wide enforcement, not just a static website setting.
And the regulators are looking beyond the code to the user experience, punishing the use of dark patterns, as we saw with the Honda case.
Absolutely. Compliance requires eliminating asymmetry in the consent user experience. The opt-out must be as easy, visible, and prominent as the opt-in. They're demanding transparency and clear processes that reflect genuine consumer intent, not just a documentation checklist.
And this scrutiny extends to data mapping. Regulators are asking what's under the hood of your systems, not just what's in your privacy policy.
They want periodically refreshed dynamic data maps that detail exactly where data flows, how long it is kept, and what the automated deletion practices are across the enterprise. This is critical as new, complex categories like neural data in Connecticut and precise geolocation in Oregon become highly regulated. Companies need real-time data governance to know exactly where these new sensitive fields live and how they are processed.
Now let's look at how specialized industry solutions are providing resilience, starting with blockchain for supply chain and inventory control.
Blockchain technology is moving into practical use as an immutable compliance ledger, particularly for seed-to-sale transparency in the cannabis industry. Private blockchain networks allow participants, growers, labs, processors, and regulators to validate transactions and identities through an immutable audit trail, often utilizing smart contracts to automatically enforce compliance rules.
So what are the practical benefits of layering blockchain governance onto a compliance process?
The benefits are measurable and massive for a high audit industry like cannabis. They include a projected reduction in compliance errors by around 25% and an increase in inventory accuracy by 10 to 15%. Crucially, it provides 100% end-to-end traceability, which becomes a non-negotiable requirement under a federal S3 controlled substance regime. It mitigates that AML risk we discussed earlier by providing an audit-proof, immutable ledger.
And as youth protection laws surge in states like Texas and Virginia, so does the technology for identity management.
The rise of youth protection laws accelerates the adoption of robust biometric age verification systems and critically logically related SMS consent.
What does that mean, logically related?
For dispensaries and platforms dealing with potentially sensitive age-gated products, compliant text messaging now requires that the request for SMS permission is directly connected to the customer's current action. And crucially, it has to occur after age eligibility has been securely verified.
So you must prove you established eligibility before consent was collected.
Exactly. It adds a whole new layer of compliance complexity.
Finally, we saw a fascinating proposal in Germany for shifting liability in the medical sector, which provides a path toward a safe harbor for small practitioners.
Germany is looking at GDPR modernization that would shift liability for data protection failings from small medical practices, like those prescribing cannabis, to certified software manufacturers.
A privacy by design model.
Exactly. It would require software companies to embed certified privacy features at the design stage and issue compliance declarations that end users can rely on.
So if a doctor uses certified software, the regulatory pressure shifts from the doctor to the technology provider, who is better equipped to handle the complexity of compliance.
Exactly. This effectively creates a safe harbor for medical cannabis businesses that use certified IT products. It focuses the massive regulatory pressure and accountability on the technology provider rather than the individual doctor. It's a fundamental rethinking of how governance is applied at the enterprise level, leveraging technology to enforce standards at the design stage.
We've covered a massive amount of ground today. We detailed how the cost of a breach is becoming astronomical, especially in the U.S., where costs at $10.22 million. We analyzed the compliance urgency created by new U.S. state laws and the frightening expiration of cure periods. We explored the emergence of massive EU mandates like the Cyber Resilience Act, and finally, we dug into the unique pressure points facing the high-value, high-risk cannabis industry in 2026, where global rules are often contradictory.
The overarching theme here is convergence and quantification. Compliance is no longer a localized issue. It's a global, interconnected challenge where the fragmentation of regulation between state, federal, specialized industry rules, and contradictory global pivots is the greatest inhibitor of security and maturity. Businesses that treat security governance as a core competitive differentiator, backed by technological automation, are the only ones saving millions, maintaining operational continuity, and securing critical capital access.
It's no longer about passing an audit once a year. It's about constant, automated vigilance against threats and regulatory shifts that happen hourly. Your security posture must match the velocity of the modern threat landscape.
And that raises a provocative thought for you, the learner, to consider as you digest this massive amount of new regulatory pressure. We noted that threat actors are now using AI to craft hyper-deceptive phishing campaigns faster than ever, generating a customized phish in just 5 minutes. But we also noted that consumers, or those acting on their behalf, are increasingly using generative AI, such as ChatGPT, to author highly detailed, legal-looking privacy complaints, sometimes even citing laws or precedents they found through an AI search. If both the attack and the resulting litigation are increasingly AI-generated, what is the viable lifespan of relying on static, human-reviewed legal documentation and manual compliance processes alone in the face of machine-speed regulatory challenges? The only viable defense strategy is one that matches the velocity of the threat and the audit.